going on, guys? Pat here. Last episode we finished up all the metal work on the car, as you can see behind me. In this episode we are going to be prepping everything for paint and painting the firewall on the bottom side of the car and hopefully getting it back on the frame, so stay tuned. So as I discussed in a previous video, on the bottom side of the car, we're going to be using the same paint stack up that I used on the frame here, which was KBS Coatings Rust Seal and then their black top coat on top of that. I have left over from the frame, so I'm going to use what I have on the bottom of the body. Hopefully be enough. If not, then I'll just have to order some more. I'm going to do the same colors and everything, which is the satin black. I really like the finish. Honestly, I prefer that over gloss or flat. So we're gonna go with that. The first thing that I need to do that I actually already did was wire wheel any of the scaling rust off the bottom of the car. We had replaced the trunk in the car as well as half the floor, so really there was only a couple small areas that I had to wire wheel and get any of the loose rust, because there really wasn't much rust on the bottom of the car at all. There's no rot through and through or anything like that. It was just mild surface rust. So I went through and did that. I went over it and scuffed it with 120 grit sandpaper. Now that I've done that, I'm gonna wipe the whole bottom of the car with acetone as well as the firewall, just to get some of the oils and dirt off from everything that we were wire wheeling and cutting. And as we've been doing all this work, just, you know, dirt and dust and flying everywhere. You can just see how disgusting the car is. There's literally like a layer of dirt on the entire thing. So get some of that off, and then I'm going to be using the KBS Coatings rust converter. Actually, I have the Port 15 version, I think, here, right here, where it's typical rust converter where you put it on and then it converts it over to a paintable zinc surface. So we're gonna put that on anywhere that there's surface rust here, and then once that fully dries, we'll get to putting on the rust seal. So I'm gonna get going on that, and I'll check in a little bit. All right, so I am pretty worn down and covered in black paint, which can only mean one thing, and that is the bottom of the car is entirely painted. Get in here and try and show it to you guys. So I ended up doing both coats in the same day. I'm filming this, I believe, 2 days after I did all this. Didn't come too far out on the trans tunnel as far as out onto the firewall, because we're going to be blending the paint in from the firewall into that. But see under here, the whole car is now painted and all set. In the front of the car, where it's factory floors, I try to utilize as much of the factory undercoating as I could, just because it's done a great job of protecting the car for the 51 years it's been in existence. So I didn't really see any need to strip that all off. So prep that surface and paint it over it to add an extra layer of protection, 2 layers because of the 2 coats. But get under here and show you guys some more. But yeah, the car is fully painted and done on the bottom side now. So that means we have to turn our attention over to the firewall now. So we still haven't decided a color as whether we're going to paint match or do like a satin black. But regardless of which color we're going with, the prep work leading up to that's going to be the same. So really the last big thing we have to do here before we can paint it and prime it and all that is the Bondo work. So like I touched on before, we're just really going to be smoothing out the areas that we integrated into the firewall. Kind of get a smooth transition here and fill in all the grinder marks. I still have to go get a hole saw bit and punch out the hole for the steering column bearing, and then I have a smaller wire wheel to get in the areas that I couldn't really get in with the angle grinder wire wheel. But I'm gonna have to grind out a couple spots where I filled in holes because they're still a little high. I think you can see there. The spot that I welded in is still a little above the firewall. So smooth that down, get it all to be mostly a low spot really, and then fill it in with Bondo. We're just gonna be doing a skim coat. You can see all the areas here that I have to work on. We're leaving these holes because that's where I mount the coil too, but all these spots where you see grind marks, we're gonna be smoothing out. So no crazy changes to the firewall. If you know it was gonna be more of a street car and I was gonna put air conditioning in it, like a vintage air system, I would shave all this over, because the vintage air unit only uses this as like a bulkhead for all the lines coming through, and then everything's hidden behind the firewall, which is a nice clean look. But we're not running AC on this car, so I'm just going to utilize the factory style heater box and the blower motor and everything. So yeah, I have to go to the store and get Bondo, and then hopefully pick this up once we have skim coat on there, and then I'll probably show some of the process of just going through and block sanding out. Nothing too exciting. It's, you know, just like doing any kind of Bondo work, but you know, I have to get through it to get this thing painted and back on the frame. So it's a sort of necessary evil to get this done. All right, so now we're gonna start getting into some of the actual work leading up to painting the firewall. I finished wire wheeling pretty much any of the paint that we're gonna take off. We're leaving some of the factory seam sealer on the firewall just because it's held up well and it is still in good shape, so it's not worth the hassle of redoing it. So I have everything sanded with pretty coarse grit sandpaper. I believe I used 120. You can go 120 or you can go coarse if you want, if you're prepping for Bondo. So now that that's all set, I'm gonna go through. I already wiped it once just with a rag to get any loose dust off. So I'm gonna go over it again with the Pre-Cleano 900 to get any oils off. And then we're gonna start skim coating with Bondo. I'm using the Evercoat Rage Gold. It's a really good body filler. It's expensive, but it's worth it. That's what we use to bodywork the entire car. So we're gonna continue on with that here on the firewall. So I'm gonna clean this up and start putting some Bondo down, and then I'll check in with you guys then. All right, so have some of the Bondo work done. Just wanted to check in. See over here, we got the frame fully covered in plastic, so it doesn't get too dusty. I mean, it's already a little dirty from sitting in here after we painted it. Just because this is a kind of a dusty environment as it is. It sits. It's not perfectly airtight. There's a couple small spots where dust can get in. Obviously, with the door open and stuff, it blows dust in here as well. But didn't want to make it any worse. There's like a layer of dust on this plastic, so it's doing its job. But what you can see here, I believe, is the third pass of putting Bondo on. So I've put Bondo on and sanded it down twice now. Just going little by little. I don't want to cake the whole thing in Bondo, so just kind of working area by area. Obviously, some areas to get it nice and level and making it look smooth, I have to put bigger patches of Bondo on, like integrating the panel we put here into the firewall. I had to put not a super thick coating, but not a skim coat, a little more than that to sort of get that angle right. So I've been going through and block sanding it where I can. Unfortunately, our block sander is pretty big. It's one we use when we're doing the body. So because of all the little nooks and crannies and contours, it's not the best for doing the firewall. So I'm using it where I can. The rest of it I'm either doing by hand, or I have a little sanding sponge here that not even using the sponge at this point. I'm just putting the sandpaper over it to try and shape some of the radiuses here and get into some of the smaller areas here. This area is pretty much done down here. I have to sort of work this edge a little bit by hand, but that's why I didn't really put any more Bondo. There's a few pinholes I'll have to put we have like a little pinhole Bondo put in there, and also the high build primer should fill out the rest of that. Then up here is done as well, where it kind of integrates into where the wiper motor goes. So I'm happy with how that looks. Well, yeah, just gotta keep sanding away. Like I said, we're filling in all these little small divots in the firewall, and then the bigger areas here. Like from the factory, there was a little divot there, and then also trying to, integrate the pieces that we put in and have it look flat. I think at this point, we are going to be painting it the body color, the Twilight Blue, and just paint match it to the car. And the heater box itself that goes over here is going to stay black. I have a little black accent in there, and then we'll also have the black accents of the master cylinders over here. But yeah, so slowly chipping away at this and working on it. Hopefully we'll only have to do maybe one more pass of Bondo after this. Ideally this will be the last pass, but I don't know exactly what it's going to look like till we sand it down and see if everything's level. As far as updates, I got some more parts in. Just that way, once we get it back on the frame, we can quickly plumb everything, and I'll take care of that while my dad's rewiring it. Originally, I had spec'd out a 3-in-1 master cylinder from Tilton. Sorry, a 3-in-1 master cylinder reservoir, which is what you see a lot of people use. They have two versions. They have this one, which is the taller one. Then they have a low-profile one where the outlets are on the front. Because we slightly shifted the pedals up to get the pedal position right for my feet, because I have pretty big feet, this isn't going to clear anymore, and so we'd have to mount it offset. Probably box closed up here. We'll probably have to mount it up over in this area here, but even then that still wouldn't look good because it would hit the wiper motor, and then over here is a little far to run all the way back over here, because it's a gravity fed system, so you have to keep it above the master cylinder. So what I ended up doing was changing directions and going to the other style of remote reservoir that Tilton has, which are these. They're going to screw directly onto the master cylinders. So instead of having a remote reservoir, I'll bolt these directly on the master cylinders. So we'll have clearance. Doesn't necessarily look as cool as the other master cylinder did, but it's, you know, from a function standpoint, it makes a lot more sense to do this. So that's through that we're gonna go. I also have all the adapters and stuff here to adapt out of the master cylinders, which I'll go more in depth in exactly how we're plumbing this once we get to the actual point of plumbing it. New brake light switch came in. We're gonna mount this down on the frame. So what this is, this takes care of two issues that we have. Which is we needed to put a T in to split the lines for the front master cylinder, for the front brakes, because there's one line coming off the master cylinder itself, but then obviously there's two lines, one for the driver's side, one for the passenger side. So you have to tee that line off the master cylinder somewhere. So we're gonna put this on the frame, which will tee it off, and there's also a third port for the brake light switch. It's a pressure activated switch. I like these a lot more than the brake pedal style switch where it physically contacts the brake pedal. So instead of trying to rig sun up to the new pedal assembly, we're just going to be using one of these pressure switches. Last thing I got from what I ordered is just line clamps. We needed a few more of these. These are 3/8 to finish up the fuel line in the front, and then also I believe these are the 3/16 ones for the rear brake line. There should be enough to do the rear and the front, but just little stuff like that. All the major stuff for the car is already ordered. And here, I say the last big thing we need is a tilt column, but those are sold out through like July, so we're probably just gonna run the factory column at first. But yeah, it's just a lot of little stuff. Really, the last thing we're gonna have to do once it's on the frame is the plumbing, which will be its own little video. And even then, I can't order some of the lines because I don't know how long they're gonna have to be until we get the car on the frame and finalize how we're routing everything. So yeah, main focus right now is just wrapping up the Bondo work. So I'm gonna sand this layer down, see where we're at. Hopefully it'll be done after this, and then I'll check in when we're about ready to start spraying some primer down. All right, so checking in here from our homemade paint booth that we built. Even though we're just painting the firewall, we still got to take all these kind of precautionary steps when we're setting up to ensure that we get a good end result. You know, this is very similar to what we did when we painted the car, because we are still basically spraying the same paint and taking the same steps that we did when we painted the car. So just to update you guys, last you saw the firewall was bare metal. Hey, I was most of the way through the Bondo work. At this point, it's entirely wrapped up and primed. We did 2 layers or 2 coats of a direct to metal etching primer, sanded that down with, I believe, 220, and then put this on. This is the high build primer. 3 coats of this. So all that's left on this is to wet sand it with 600 grit, and then it'll be ready for base coat to be sprayed on. It's not perfect. Like I said, we're not trying to eliminate every single, you know, wrinkle and bump. Really, our main focus was right in this area here where we were integrating the panel that we put in with the factory firewall, which looks great. All these little waves and wrinkles that are in the factory sheet metal, I didn't really care about because, like I said, I'm not going for a totally shaved, clean firewall look. I'm fine with this. I just wanted to clean it up a little bit and make it look better than what was there. You'll notice there are 2 new holes in the firewall, this big guy here and a smaller one up here. Both of those are just for wiring. This one's going to be for the main harness for the fuel injection system. Originally that came through the factory wiring harness hole, which was about here. This just hides it a little better. We wanted to clean up the engine bay. We don't really like, especially my dad doesn't like having wires run everywhere in an engine bay, and we already tucked them somewhat, but we had the opportunity here to shift that hole down and hide it a little more. But we also wanted to keep them accessible in case we have to diagnose anything or need to get to the wires for the fuel injection harness. So that was kind of the best compromise between moving it to hide the wires, because this is going to be basically down by the back side of the distributor, so it'll run up the distributor and then into the intake, so you're not going to see anything. So best compromise between hiding it there and also having it still be accessible. Same thing with this. This is just going to be for the side harness, so it's going to be for like the starter relay, the fan relays, the headlight wiring, things like that, turn signals, whatnot. That'll be up under where the fender mounts, and then that'll kind of route off to the side here and then go up over the wheel well and then to the front core support. And that's just the nature of the kit we bought from Painless. They sell one that's for like a bulkhead, kind of like the factory style. I think they also sell a universal bulkhead one, and then they have one with the grommets, which is the one that we opted to go for. You'll notice there's still no hole for the steering column. That's because we changed our minds yet again when we did the final mock-up yesterday before we sprayed the final coat of primer. We were actually trying to start routing the throttle cable because we were going to throw the hole in for the throttle cable, but we found the issue that when we have the actual linkage hooked up on the pedals, because there's a separate linkage attachment or sort of linkage assembly that attaches to the gas pedal, the factory column doesn't clear. So now we're going back to our original plan of doing a sweet manufacturing race column, which gives us tons of room and clearance, which means it's good that we didn't punch a big hole in the firewall, because to run that aftermarket bearing that we were talking about for a factory column, it's like a 2 7/8 hole versus, you know, just a 7/8 hole for this new column. So yeah, I still have the pilot hole there. It's pretty much going to locate in the same spot. So now I just need to figure out what exact size hole I need to drill for the bearing coming through. But it's good and bad. It's cool to be running a race column. We're just going to have to make a few changes to the wiring harness and, you know, do an aftermarket turn signal setup and stuff, which I'll go over once we start wiring the car. But yeah, this is pretty much wrapped up. So today I'm hopefully going to wet sand this in the afternoon, and then tomorrow we'll spray the base and clear coat, and we'll see where we're at. If the clear coat looks good, I'm gonna drop it on the frame. We can still add, you know, extra holes that we need to, or the hole really just for the steering column and the throttle cable. Once it's on the frame, there's really nothing in the way. And if we don't like it, then I'll wet sand and buff it to clean up the clear coat a little bit. But you know, as long as we spray the clear coat on decently, it really shouldn't be an issue. So gonna get to work on that, and then hopefully the next time you guys see this, it'll be in color and be looking a lot better. All right, so we're picking this section of the video up a few days after the last one. The paint booth is all ripped down, which can only be one thing, and that is the firewall is finally painted. Pretty happy with how that came out. Like I said, we ended up paint matching it to the car. You really can't compare it to the actual paint on the car right now just because it's so dusty. It looks like a totally different shade, but it's pretty much a dead-on match, as it should be, because we used the exact paint that we painted the car with. We still have about a half a gallon. We didn't really use that much to paint the car. So we went in with direct-to-metal primer, high build. I think we did 2 coats of base coat and then like 4 coats of clear. There's a few runs on it. I don't know if the camera will really pick up the runs. Here you go. So today I'm going to go through and wet sand and buff the runs out. I'm not going to try and eliminate all the orange peel and get it, you know, looking like glass like we did on the body. It is still the firewall at the end of the day. So the goal for today is to get this all wet sand and buff it, and then at the end of the day, hopefully drop this thing back on the frame. As far as my methodology for wet sanding and buffing, I'm going to go over the runs with 1500 grit, then 2000 grit, then 3000 grit, and then I'll do a 2-stage buff. I use Meguiar's M105 and M205. I use 105 on most brands orange pad. I have the Grio's Garage pads here just because I can get those locally, but I also use like Hex Logic buffing pads and stuff. And then to finish it, I'll use a microfiber finishing pad. Either that or like a white pad is what I'll normally use with the Meguiar's 205. So yeah, happy with this. Happy with how it came out. Looks good. Yeah, like I said, we were going between this and just doing a satin black, and the firewall's been black the whole time we built the car, so figure we mix it up and paint match it. So I'm gonna start wet sanding and buffing a little bit, and then I'll pick up with you guys once I've made some good progress on that. All right, so we finally got this thing back on the frame here. It's quite a strange thing to see. You know, I'm so used to it being up in the air on the 4x4s and jack stands that it looks super low, even though it's no lower than it was before. I mean, technically it's going to be a little lower in the back just because the height of the tire changed by, I think, half an inch from what it was over to the new setup. But wasn't too bad. Nothing got damaged, nothing broken. Went on smoothly. Didn't damage the firewall that I just spent, you know, a lot of time painting and wet sanding and buffing and stuff. But yeah, so not too much more to go on about in this video. I really just kind of wanted to wrap it up with getting it back on the frame. As far as what's next, it's just going to be a lot of small stuff. A lot of the big fabrication work and whatnot's already done on the car. So I think the first thing we're going to get going on in the next video is probably just painting over the bare metal surfaces in the floor. The whole floor is going to get painted in the car eventually. But just for now, to try and cover up that bare metal, we're going to use some of the paint that we have on there to try and cover that up, and then start hanging the pedals and start routing the wiring. So yeah, we'll get started on that one in the next video, but that's really gonna do it for this video. Thank you guys for watching. Hopefully you guys are excited to, you know, see some good headway being made on this thing now that it's finally back on the frame. You know, now it's exciting because it's starting to look like a car again. So yeah, if you liked the video, leave a like. If you want to see more, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.